Hi, I'm Matt. I'm a leader at Grace Church Beckenham, and welcome to these COVID conversations. This is an interview between myself and Matt Lloyd, asking the question, how do we cope when everything changes? Matt knows what it is for life to be sailing along and then for everything to change in an instant. Matt experienced a spinal cord injury that left him in a wheelchair and needing to start life again from scratch. I'll interview him and then help us reflect together. Coronavirus has got many of us asking life's big questions, and we're passionate about helping people explore the answers that Christianity gives. We've put a whole load of resources together, including this interview, and you could check out our COVID Conversations resource page to find out more. There are other interviews like this. There are ways you could get into the Bible for yourself. There's a guided read through of John's account of Jesus' life. That's using a resource called the Word 1-to-1. It's something you could do on your own, but it's something we'd encourage you to do alongside somebody else, and we'd love to help facilitate that. There are courses you could join starting soon, like Life Explored, a small group course based around a video presentation and then looking at a short passage of the Bible together. And there are also ways that you could get in touch and let us know what you think. To find out more, check out gracechurchbeckenham.org and our COVID Conversations resource page. But for now, here's the interview and reflection. And it starts off with a quick snapshot of what life's like day to day for Matt. On the screen here, just to give you people an idea of the different ways that you
the different modes of transport.
The
scooter in the middle, and then various other ways of getting around as well. That's right.
So just Matt, just start us off. Tell us about your upbringing.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a happy home. Life was comfortable growing up, so I guess a little experience of suffering, a stable, loving home, and we grew up in northwest London, and I went to school there, and then I went off to university in Durham, and I guess if you sort of if you summarized what I was into, I loved sport of any sort. I was I'm a bit like a dog, really. I just will chase any ball, kick it, hit it, football, rugby, cricket, golf, tennis, ball. I don't know if that counts as sport, but anything really. That was me. So, and then I was an English teacher, as you said, coaching the rugby team, a youth worker, and then a church minister after that. So, yeah.
And our title is Coping When Everything Changed. How did things change for you in 2013?
Yeah, so holidays were always very active for me. Games on the beach, walking in the Pyrenees, windsurfing in Italy. Those were some highlights. So February 2013, I was in the Scottish Highlands with some friends, and we'd had some good days, and halfway through the week on the Wednesday we went for a glorious hike, a happy hike around a loch, and we came back to the lodge, and all was fine at dinner that evening. But things changed when at 3 a.m. I woke up very suddenly, and I had sudden and searing back pain, sort of there, but on the back there, and I was in agony. I couldn't sleep, but I assumed that it was muscular from carrying the rucksack or something like that. And the next day, I couldn't really take part in what the others were doing. I think they were learning to fly fish. I sort of joined in, but couldn't really. And I basically spent the next 2 days just lying down in pain. We went to see a GP up there, a doctor, and I was given strong painkillers, and that helped. but basically I said, let's get back to London and hope to sort it out there. So is that making sense so far?
Yeah, so you just sense big back pain, but just suspicions weren't raised that it was anything deeply wrong at that moment.
No, not really. I knew it was significant, but just mysterious. But thought, that's what I said. Let's just get back to London. We can sort it out there. So that was the Saturday. We set off, and we got out of the service station. Everything was fine. We got out. Maybe there was another stop. I can't remember. But we got out at the services in Stoke-on-Trent, and to my shame, I couldn't put it on a map at that point. It's sort of north of Birmingham. And as I got out of the car and we went, over to the services, my legs felt funny, they felt wobbly, and immediately my friends made the right decision. We need to go to A&E, so we raced along to A&E, and basically over the next 4 or 5 hours, as I and friends sat in A&E, basically my legs just sort of froze in front of me, just lying on the bed, and just sensation stopped. There was complete paralysis of the legs, and at that point I just remember the medics scurrying around. Different people would come in. Someone would tap my legs and say, can you feel that? And I'd say, not really. And scratch another bit, and can you feel that? And no. And things were going in a bad direction. So that was the first bit of it. And then they said we need to do an MRI scan to find out what's going on. And the results came back from that. And what I was told, that I basically had a freak abscess in effect on my spine at level T8. For anyone medical out there, are you medical? Does that make sense to you?
In any way.
So you've got your spinal cord and various vertebrae. So T8 is about there. So this thing had come out of nowhere. I'd not done anything wrong. There hadn't been an accident, and people never got to the bottom of. The medics never got to the bottom of why it happened. These things happen rarely, and it had happened to me.
And you were saying earlier that you went in for a surgery, and you kind of picked up this might be a bit like a trapped nerve, and that kind of expectation initially for the.
Yeah, when you hear that, so they said, there's pressure on the spinal cord, and we need surgery to relieve that pressure. We need to do it tonight, is what they've said. And as you said, I remember hearing that and thinking, this sounds like a very serious trapped nerve. Obviously I knew that it was affecting my sensation with my feet.
Yeah.
I heard that, we'll relieve the pressure, and I thought in my mind, things will unravel. That's how these things work.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what I was told. And family were phoned and arrived that night and the next morning from London. Very hard to get that phone call, and then the distance from the south where we live up to there, very hard indeed, and would continue to be the case over the coming months. That journey up and down was very hard, and their support then and now and since has been unbelievable. So that was surgery that Saturday night. And shall I go on? Is that?
Yeah, well, just and so you come round from the surgery.
Yeah.
And you're expecting it to. The doctor is expecting it to have made a difference. Has it made a difference?
Yeah. So I remember a couple of scenes from the next couple of days quite vividly. The first was the next morning, when the surgeon was in the room, and family and certainly a medical team were gathered round, and I couldn't see my feet at that point because there were blankets and bandages, and they were pulled off, and the doctor said, try and wiggle your toes. and I tried, and there was no movement. There wasn't a flicker, and I thought this can't be happening. And I could tell from the look on his face that he was hoping for more. I mean, I was hoping for more, but I could see the flash of disappointment in a sense across his face, that he had expected more, and that was a very hard moment for everyone, for family, for friends, for me. And that's when it started to dawn on me, this is serious. That was starting to. So that was the first scene that I can clearly remember. The other scene that just stands out, I think it was one of the next few nights when there was still no movement at all, and the surgeon was a lovely man, a lovely Greek man, and I remember he was standing at the foot of the bed, and it was dark, and he was looking at the clipboard at the foot of the bed, and I remember the beeps. If you've been in hospital, those beeps, they're just incessant, aren't they? You forget them when you're out in the world out here, but they were. And I thought, I've got to ask him the question. And so I did. And I said, Mr. Sarakis, will I be able to run again? And medics, they're careful with what they say at that point. But he said, there was some hope that I might walk, but there's a complexity to these injuries. And then he said, and I remember what he said. He said, you need to prepare yourself for significant life change. Life will be different. And I think that was probably the lowest moment. I would guess, others, family in different rooms had those conversations at different times, but that was the lowest point for me. And I was,
You said you had pneumonia at the time.
Yes, I was very unwell at the same time as that. So I was struggling on a number of fronts. I was unwell for quite a while. But I remember he left the room. I was alone in the room. Apart from the beeps, and I looked at the ceiling, which is. Was pretty much all that I could do at that point. And I let out a very confused and very raw prayer. I guess it was. It included tears and shouting and some words you won't find in the Bible, and as well as things like why God and where are you God. And are you there, God? And what are you doing, God? And actually, some might be surprised that those things are actually in the Bible, that the Psalms, God says, you can talk like this. You may need to say words like this to me. And I did. I certainly did. But the thing was that it was directed to God. We can come to evidence in a minute for why I'm persuaded he's there. But I did go to him.
Yeah. So just wind the story back for us, and you were facing this as a Christian with just millions of questions, but just how did you become a Christian? Just help us with that.
Yeah, so as I said, I was from a loving home, it was a Christian home. I'd heard about Jesus from my parents and from church, and maybe the easiest way to describe it is that at school I was Mr. Effort Prize. I don't know, maybe you were top of the class, Matt. Were you top of the class?
No, I never got either the effort or achievement prize until year 11, and I got the effort prize and had to walk up the front and get
Well, if I ever got a prize, it wasn't for brilliance, it was for trying hard. That was sort of me. Actually, that's not quite, apart from one time when the teachers mixed it up and I was announced as the top of the class, and the class SWAT was given the effort prize. And I went up and, I was quite surprised. And then I sat down and the teacher sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, I'm afraid we, administrative error. We have to swap them back. And I'm still in therapy now, recovering from that.
But you don't bring it up.
I don't bring it up
in front of 100 people.
I'm not bitter about that. But my point is, I took that attitude to God. I thought, if you try hard, if I'm not as bad as other people, then I get to heaven. You work your way to God. And at some point in my teenage years, I realized that God wouldn't have bothered to send his son to this earth to die on a cross if trying hard was going to be good enough. That sort of came home to me, that this must be a big problem. And at some point it came home to me that actually I'd ignored God that I'd taken his gifts, food, fun, friends, family, but I'd ignored the giver, and I'd not treated him well, and that I needed to be forgiven for that, and needed a fresh start with him. And again, at some point, having heard that, I was also overjoyed, actually, when I got it, that Jesus died on the cross for the way that I'd treated God, that he swapped in for my mess and my failure, so that just as a free gift of grace, I could be forgiven, brought into relationship with God. So that at some point I turned and trusted and followed. So that's how I came to be a Christian, how I ended up facing this.
So how did knowing that and believing that, how did that help you sort of in that dark moment? What difference did it make, and how did it help in the kind of as you begun recovery?
Well, it helped. It does help. I'd given, I'm a church minister, I'd given the talk on why does God allow suffering. In fact, I'd given one about a month before, and in fact, I'd remembered, I referenced at the end of it, a lady who'd been paralyzed and is in a wheelchair. And, suddenly I was having to think, well, how do you actually, where do you start? You know the theory, but where do you personally start when this happens? And I was looking for foundations. And, you asked me to mention, address this topic because of the world we're living in today. And I guess in a sense, we're all looking for foundations. We're in a changed world, and we're wondering, is there any solid ground underneath? And for me, the first bit of solid ground that I knew, but that I had to, put my foot on, so to speak, was the cross of Jesus, that Jesus died in history. And as I mentioned, I knew that that's how God forgives us, but it also is the proof that God is for us. And it didn't feel like God was for me in my circumstances. And in fact, did I mention this to you earlier, that a man who I never met, but who is now a friend now, sent me a letter. And I received lots of wonderful letters. People were so kind when I was in hospital. But he said, I'm sorry to hear, I'm praying for you. But he said, don't judge whether God loves you by your circumstances. They're not a very good guide. Proof positive that God loves you, Matt, is that he sent his son to die for you. And that was, I knew it, but that just came home to me. That was the first foundation. Does that make sense? Is that,
yeah. But it's just, you can say you believe it on one side, but then having that moment where you're like, okay, do I really believe this?
So the first was the cross. The second was the historical resurrection of Jesus, and that had a couple of parts to it. First, that I said, why believe in God? For me, there are lots of clues, evidences, but the person of Jesus and the resurrection, nice idea that God is for me, but I wanted proof. And I re-examined the eyewitness accounts. I taught on them as a minister, but I personally examined and re-examined them and was persuaded and re-persuaded that Jesus died, and then he walked out of his own grave in history, and people saw him and touched him and ate with him. And that proof led to the next thing, which is hope. That if Jesus rose physically from the grave, then there is a physical resurrection to come. And that started to help, as I thought, well, if life has changed and if there are things that I'm going to miss out on and not be able to do, if this life is not everything, then there is hope. And that is how the Bible presents it, that the physical resurrection of Jesus guarantees a new physical world to come without death and evil and viruses and wheelchairs, and where I do believe that I will be given a physical new body. It's not just a sort of wishful thinking. I believe the resurrection of Jesus means I'll be given a physical new body, and run again and enjoy sports. Best of all, actually in the presence of the relationship I was made for with Jesus. So those foundations have been the truths that sustained me in the early days and have sustained me since. I don't know. It's not been the force of human spirit, or that I'm a natural optimist. It's been those truths, that person, that has made all the difference.
And just, in a sense, we're still at that moment in the lowest point, processing it for the first time.
Yes.
You talked to me before about lots of the ups and downs along the long, hard road for recovery, but just kind of finish the story for us. How did?
So I'll give you some edited highlights from that moment on. So I was 2 months in Stoke-on-Trent, unwell with pneumonia. I was then transferred to a spinal unit, Stoke Mandeville. Some might have heard of it, the home of the Paralympics, and that was a great place to be for someone who loves sport, because that was their heritage. And I learned to chase balls in a new way in the wheelchair, wheelchair basketball. And
let me just share the screen for people so we can see a kind of gauge some of the change from the left to
early days
left to the right.
On the left with the stylish stockings, that's right, and then the sort of updated version with the sports wheelchair and basketball. Yeah, that's right.
So there was real physical progress, and you were thinking, okay, maybe this will keep going and I'll regain where we'll be able to run again.
It's hard to know how far. They say there's a window of recovery, and I certainly was able to make great progress. Picked up these sports, wheelchair tennis I play now, but so 4 months there, and it took a while, but eventually I was able to stand, and they pump you up in a machine, and then I was able to walk with a machine with wheels, and then a Zimmer frame, and then walking sticks. You saw from that picture at the start that I'm able to do that. And I left my lockdown in effect I was quite scared actually going out into the outside world, maybe like we are today, a bit scared at the end of lockdown. But a spinal injury affects lots of things, but in terms of mobility, I was able to get to the point that even though I have impaired sensation even today, I'm able to live with a combination of walking sticks and a wheelchair. So and I'm thankful for that. As you say, it's been a long journey, and I have to work to maintain it. But I'm thankful for the progress that I've made, even though there are things that I can't do and wish I could, and frustrations and all ups and downs. But generally, I'm okay.
It's wonderful to hear the progress you've been able to make. Just there's a parallel story here with Ruth. Just bring us in on some of that.
Yeah, so I'm married to Ruth, and the parallel story is that we'd gone out. We weren't together at the time of my injury. That was very hard for her, when she heard the news, as it was for others. But actually, her story would be that Christianity helped. That God helped Ruth cope with all that changed in me. I mean, marriage to me with a spinal injury wasn't what she'd pictured, but she found strength from God and those same truths to cope with the new reality. And it took some time, but we married 3.5 years ago, and 2.5 years ago our daughter Grace was born. So. That's been a wonderful. They're very precious, and that's been a wonderful part of the story. But I would just say, Matt, that I look at that. It'd be easy to look at that and think that's the story. That bit of the story ended happily. That's the proof that God is for you. That came together. But it doesn't always for everyone, and not everything. With my disability has been fixed. So I do go back to that thing I mentioned at the start about that it is the cross of Jesus, God sending his son for us, that is the proof that God is for us.
That's right, isn't it? You just can't, like the card you got, you can't judge it by your present circumstance. Always you've got to judge it by the cross and the hope for what he's offering beyond the grave. Just give us a brief handle on just how lockdown is for you. I mean, you're at more risk. Your immune system is sort of compromised slightly.
It's hard to tell. There may be more vulnerability, so we're erring on the side of caution. I'm Ruth's kindly doing the bulk of the shopping, but we're being cautious on that. I'm more like us all. I'm more cooped up, I guess. yeah, I find that frustrating with not being able to use the things I normally use to exercise and to maintain things. So I'm just, being creative with the space that we've got outside. But yeah, so I guess that's how we're coping physically. Yeah. And I don't know, the things that I mentioned in terms of how I cope with the bigger things, it's confusing, isn't it, what we're living through? And I don't have the answers or what's going on, but I do come back to whatever we think of God, that he took his own medicine and knows what it's like to suffer in this world, that he must be for us, that he would send his son for the people of this world. So, and then what I said about the resurrection, as the death toll rises, and we see that on the screen, that the hope is the other thing that I'm coming back to as well. So.
So encouraging to hear, Matt, and how you're able to trust the Lord with what he sent. Let me just give us a brief reflection. I'm going to take us to one verse from the Bible that I think encapsulates, brings together some of what Matt's been saying, and then just be reflecting as well. There's be a chance to ask any questions you might have. So just hold on to those, jot those down if you'd like to. But the question is, how do we cope when everything changes? And lockdowns change something for all of us, hasn't it? The queues, the distance from loved ones, the Zoom fatigue. I mean, who knew that was ever going to be a phrase we used a lot? For some of us, massive things have changed. Don't know who's watching now, but lost jobs, hopes, relationships, and to some of us it'll feel like the kind of foundation we've been building our lives on has kind of given way underneath us and everything's come crashing down. We think our foundation was just too flimsy. Tried to ignore it, the next bottle, the next box set, but we're left with questions. What's the point of life? How do I cope? How do I face death? And Matt's story says, well, there is a way to cope. In amongst the doubts and the fears, Matt found a firm foundation on which he could rebuild. And it was this, it's like he said, God is for him. Let me show you the verse from the Bible that we're going to look at. It says, if God is for us, Paul says to the church in Rome, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? I don't know what your reaction is to that as you look at it. Maybe you think, well, there isn't a God, or you think, well, he's there, but he's at best apathetic, or if not just vindictive. But just imagine for a second it was true that the creator of the universe is for you, that he's full of love and will go to any length to help. Wouldn't that lay a solid foundation? Meaning, significance, acceptance, hope. And we need to be careful how we say this, because Matt's not saying Christianity is true because it works. He's saying it works because it's true. That the foundation there is not imaginary. Instead, there's something real, there's something solid. There's a factual foundation for the resurrection, factual foundation for all of this. As we come, we find a God who is ready to be for us. And this verse gives us two places to look and one place not to look. The one place not to look is our present circumstance. Remember the card, you can't always judge God's love by circumstance. There was a moment for Matt, it seemed like God was against him. And actually that's true for the writer Paul. A few verses later, he says he's faced trouble and hardship and persecution and famine and nakedness and danger and sword. How could God be for me and allow that? And yet Paul, Matt say, you can't always see God's love in your present circumstance. But there are two places you can look. You can always see it if you look at the cross, and you can always see it in the future, the cross has won. Let's start with the future. The cross is one. God will give those who come to him all things. Look at the end of that verse. How will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? That's the hope the Bible holds out. One day beyond death. Why do all the films on Disney Plus end with happy endings? Why do these stories resonate so deeply? Because we were built for a happy ending. The wonderful thing Matt was saying to me earlier, whatever the surgeon said, will I ever run again? God says, yes, Matt, you will run again in the new creation. For those who come to him, he will graciously give us all things along with his son, a world made new again, beyond death, with no more virus, no more abscesses, no more brokenness, pain, tears, death. God is for us. Look at what he's promising. You can build on the foundation of hope. God is for us, we can look at the future. God is for us, we can look at the cross. So it's not just the gift he's giving, it's the price he's paid to give it. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also graciously give us all things? Paul's saying, look at what he gave up. For many of us, family is the most precious thing in the world, and lockdown is reminding us of that. But can you imagine being Matt's parents by his hospital bed? They've given anything to make it better. And yet, look at what God did at the cross. He gave his son. In the Bible, the son is not some random third party. He's God himself come down. And he's not spared. Doesn't spare himself betrayal, whipping, humiliation, crucifixion. Because God is choosing to be for us. So here's the logic of this foundation. And it might look impossible in the moment that God is for us, yet it's even more impossible that God would be for us enough to give his own son and then suddenly turn against us. You don't pay that kind of price for someone and then decide you don't like them anymore. That's what's convinced Matt God is for him. The cross, it's the firm foundation. God has chosen to be for us as we come to him. And we'll only really get the wonder of that if we realize he didn't have to. In fact, the Bible's message is you really shouldn't. God is really for us, ready to be for us, and yet we have been against God. So coronavirus brings out the best and the worst, brings out the kindness, the compassion, and yet we're always asking, where does all the hoarding come from, the selfishness? Why are those relationships so strained by lockdown? Why do we live in this broken world? And the Bible says at base, we've all turned against God, turned against him and against others. And this rejection's like a terminal virus eating away at us. And it leads, the Bible says, to death every time, death beyond death, as God would turn against us in judgment. And yet God, through his son, has chosen to be like our NHS heroes who have died in service of our country. I saw some of the list the other day: John Alagos, Liz Glanister, Sammy Shusha, Amy O'Rourke, choosing to face the virus head on, to take it and to die so we wouldn't have to. And that is what Jesus does as he dies at the cross, dying the death we should die. It's not automatic, but it's for everyone, whatever we've done, whatever we're like, everyone who comes to God and asks, everyone who takes the gift and unwraps it. Do you see what God is like? He's not distant and aloof to suffering. Instead, he chooses to suffer to one day end suffering. Just imagine for a moment, if that were true. It is true. You can build your life on that foundation. Look at the future. Look at the cross.
Our prayer is that what we've just heard grips us and makes us think we need to take another step. This sounds amazingly serious and seriously amazing. I need to find out more. And the place to head is gracechurchbeckenham.org and look out for COVID conversation links. On the links, you'll find ways to watch other videos, other interviews like this, stories of lives changed by Jesus. You'll also find ways to get into the Bible for yourself or alongside others. There's a resource called The Word 1-to-1. It gives you a guided read-through of John's account of Jesus' life. And it's something you could look at for yourself, or you could do it alongside someone else, and we'd love to help facilitate that. There are also courses that you could join starting soon, like Life Explored. It's a short DVD-based course, a short video presentation, and a chance to discuss in small groups a short passage of the Bible. And then there are ways for you to get in touch. We'd love to know what you think. Why not take a next step and check out the website?